And welcome back, everybody, to another Friday night hangout here at I'm Not a Coach. I'm your host, Dave Huerta. Thank you so much for joining us, man. And how's your week been, man? Starting to get a little spring out here. It's not as cold in some areas in Wisconsin here where I live, man. It's been beautiful. A little windy, but pretty darn good. But yeah, man, how have you guys been? Let me know. Let me know in the chat if you're popping in. But yeah, so tonight we're starting out at 7 here, so it's going to be a little bit of a shorter stream, but we're still going to talk about some football content, obviously. And at the end here, towards the end, if you want to join in, we're going to talk about some of our favorite wrestlers. I've been watching a little bit of WWE stuff recently. Watched the Royal Rumble a couple weeks ago, and then recently, I think it was like a couple days ago, I finally caught up on the last the chamber matches, man. And so I said, heck, it's the off season. There isn't a ton of football news, especially after most of free agency has kind of been slowing down a lot. It's the month before the draft, so we got to talk about something, and we'll talk about some WWE stuff, man. So I'm going to talk about some of my favorite wrestlers, give you the top 5 here that I grew up watching, and please chime in the chat if you have any opinions on either mine or if you want to let me know yours, man. Who is your number 1? Who's your number 2? Tell me everything. But yeah. So first, we're going to talk about something that happened a couple days ago. It's not huge news, but when it comes to Green Bay signings, it's pretty surprising. But that is going to be the signing of All right, there we go. So the signing of Mecole Hardman there from Kansas City. So Mecole Hardman comes with a pretty impressive resume when it comes to team accomplishments. He is a 3-time Super Bowl champion, obviously all of them with the Kansas City Chiefs. He won, not only did he win 3, but he actually caught the game-winning touchdown in their second game against San Francisco about 3 years ago. It was an overtime, quick little throw to the right, got into the end zone, game-winning touchdown from Mecole Hardman. I think that was only his second catch in a Super Bowl game. He hasn't been featured. He hasn't been their number 1, number 2. He's mostly been a role player for both, basically the last 4 years. His best career numbers were, I believe it was his 3rd year. He caught about 59 passes, 2 touchdowns only. His career high is 6, which he actually was able to get during his rookie season over there in KC. But in his 3rd year, 59 catches, career high, along with, I think it was around 650 something yards during the regular season. So pretty solid, but obviously clearly at best, number 3 numbers right there. And I think his role in Green Bay is not necessarily going to be about how many catches he can make on the offense, or even how many touchdowns. I think it's going to be mostly the Packers are hoping he's going to be their number 1 return man, with Keyshawn Nixon moving into a more permanent role on the defense there, especially with the lack of depth that they currently have. And obviously the potential trade or even release of Jair. There's been no news of whether they're going to be able to hash anything out. It looks like it may not happen, but at the end of the day, whatever happens, I think regardless, they're going to want to have Keyshawn back there to be basically the primary slot guy, along with whoever they have, Javon Bullard, whoever, or Hobbs, if they decide to put him in there. I think Hobbs is going to be staying to the outside, but who knows? He has a lot of snaps in the NFL on the inside. But once again, talking about Mecole Hardman, so we know he can catch. We know that he's been able to play plenty of games. Injuries have not been a massive part of his career, luckily, but he has had some injuries. Um, he did leave KC after his rookie season. He spent about less than half a season with the Jets. I think he only caught one or two passes there, maybe. And then he was asked to be he asked the Jets to trade him, and they ended up trading him back to KC for I think was a 6th round draft pick. And that was basically it, man. He's been solid. I think that same year he actually caught that game-winning touchdown. And yeah, he was there this past season. Looked pretty okay during the regular season, but then as the season went on, he did not have as big of a role in the offense, especially with the amount of injuries that the KC had in the receiver department. You were thinking that he might have had a little bit more of a role, but just was not the case. And then he ended up finishing last season on injured reserve. Did not play anything in the playoffs. No Super Bowl. So once again, this is not a role that I think the Packers are expecting him to be their number one, number two receiver. I think this is more of shoring up that special teams unit, along with the potential gadget plays. You know, he's a fast guy, man. Fast guy, small guy, but very fast. I think he could be a solid complement to what Jaden Reed does, and I think that might even give Jaden Reed some more opportunities on the outside, and it won't just be him. You know, anytime you see Reed, you're expecting him to do some type of jet sweeps, something underneath over the middle, something like that. But I think with Mecole, if they can get those guys both on the same field, there's a lot of speed between those two guys, and I think it might give the Packers a little bit more variety when it comes to their play calling, potentially. And I think, once again, Mecole is also going to be replacing some of the speed that the Packers are losing with Christian Watson, who will not be ready for the regular season, or at least the start of the regular season. So I think that's what kind of contributed to the signing here of Mecole Hardman. I don't expect anything major, but hey, man, who knows? If you can get a couple of returns, you know, even if they're not touchdowns, if you can give us kind of what Keyshawn did a couple of years ago, get us in great position, be a threat in the punt game, in the kick return game, I think that'll go a long way to basically increasing his value on the team outside of the offense. But yeah, let me know what you think. Was this a good signing? Low risk, maybe decent reward. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it was a major contract. I think there wasn't a big market for Mecole. Again, finished the season on injured reserve, has had very little opportunities offensively to contribute over the last couple of seasons, anywhere he's gone. So I think this is just one of those, the Packers are saying, hey, let's take a flyer. If this guy can give us even some decent numbers on the return game, great. And if he can contribute a little bit on offense, even better. But I don't think this was the the number one receiver that Jacobs was hoping for, Josh Jacobs, when he mentioned something a couple months ago. But hey, we'll see what he can do. All right. So let's move on to the second topic here. And that is going to be actually talking about the drama that is engulfing Pittsburgh. Might be a little bit dramatic. But I think it was about a week ago, maybe a little bit less, Cam Hayward, one of the veterans of the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially on that defensive side. I believe he was asked kind of what his opinion was on waiting for Rodgers, and Cam was pretty blunt and pretty honest, like how he's always been throughout most of his career. And he was like, I don't care. Like, if you want to sign with us, sign with us. If you don't. I don't care. We're not waiting for you. You know, and I think that if this was 3 or 4 years ago and Aaron Rodgers was a free agent picking between, 2 or 3 teams, I think that would be a very different tone. But I think you're starting to see the the lack of production over the last couple of years that Rodgers has had. Yes, he's been injured. Yes, he's getting a lot older and things like that. But I think you're starting to see that some of the opinions of Rodgers, at least in what he can currently do as a player, is starting to catch up. I think there's still a great amount of respect. I don't think Cam was saying, "Oh, this guy is terrible. He's not." He knows what Rodgers is. He's a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest to ever throw the ball, one of the greatest quarterbacks, and I think he's still a somewhat decent starter in the NFL. He's probably still one of the best 32 in the NFL. But having said that, even though you're probably one of the best 32, there's probably about 8 or 9 guys that may not be on your level yet. And we're talking about the J.J. McCarthys. We're talking about the guys that are only in their first or second, or just in their first or second year. And that doesn't even include any of the guys that are going to get drafted in a month as well. And you have to, it's always a cost analysis. Yes, Rodgers may give the Pittsburgh Steelers the best opportunity that they have now to win. But is that one, are they going to win a Super Bowl? Probably not. I don't think Rodgers is capable of dragging a team to a Super Bowl like he used to. I think, once again, if this was 5, 6, 7 years ago, very different conversation. But I think now Rodgers is at that point where he's not as mobile as he used to be. I think he doesn't buy enough time, or isn't able to buy enough time for himself, especially when the play starts to break down. But yeah, man, I think you're starting to see some of that kind of be understood. I think Cam is like, yeah, he's a great quarterback. Yeah, he's probably the best option that we currently have. But I mean, I don't think this is not a Peyton Manning, a Tom Brady situation where they're coming off, a very productive season, or where they are going to be able to bring in a slew of, coaches, players that are going to follow them. I think we saw that with New York. Rodgers was able to bring his guys, but not anybody else. When we saw Tom go to Tampa Bay, it wasn't just his guys. It wasn't just Gronk or Edelman that went there. It was Ndamukong Suh. It was JPP. You saw guys from all over the league that at one point or another were either some of the elites, or were still or at the very least were still very productive, and they followed Tom to Tampa Bay. You saw that with Peyton when he went to Denver. Wes Welker went over there, along with a bunch of other guys that were playing with Peyton during his time with the Colts. But with Rodgers, it seems for the most part that the guys that followed, or at least signed with the Jets to play with Rodgers, were guys that already played with him, that were kind of his best friends. There weren't other guys, from around the league that were like, oh yeah, let's go play with Rodgers, man. Let's go. I'll take a pay cut. I don't know. I think that's what you're starting to see, and it's not surprising, especially with Cam. I think we saw Cam last year kind of go with Russell Wilson, say, hey, we'll go to you, we'll talk to you, we're trying to get you in here. It failed, clearly. It wasn't good enough. And I think Cam is just like, we're not doing that again. Either you want to play here or you don't. If you do, great, we'll follow you. You're the quarterback, you're the leader, bam. But if you don't, fine. You go play somewhere else, go sign somewhere else, we don't care. And he made it pretty obvious. He's like, hey, we'll run with Mason, man. He's been in this locker room. He has respect in this locker room. We've won games with Mason Rudolph. And, at the end of the day, it's about the culture. And I think that's what the big thing that Cam, I think he mentioned it slightly, but I don't think it was a dig at Rodgers. I think it was just more of like, we know our culture here in Pittsburgh. We know what the coaching staff has put in place for almost 20 years. We know the players that have been here for a long time, including himself. And we know guys like Mason, who have been in this locker room, who has gone through the ups and downs with the guys here, with the culture here. We know what he brings. We know what he's going to give us, and we just can support him. With Rodgers, it's been very clear. It's his way. He wants it his way. Once again, that's perfectly fine. That's not a bad thing to be. Rodgers has almost earned, in my opinion, he has earned that right to be kind of, hey, this is how I want it. Having said that, when you haven't been able to win consistently, when you haven't been able to play at an extremely high level like Rodgers used to in his, even up until a couple of years ago, he was an MVP 2 time, back-to-back MVP. When it's been 3 years since you've been, at the top of your game, some of your demands are not always going to be met with the, oh yeah, no problem, man, whatever you want. So, I think whether it was true that Rodgers was hoping to be with the Vikings, I think that would have been his best opportunity. I think they have a better overall team than Pittsburgh does, but I think Minnesota understood that they did not want to stunt the development of J.J. McCarthy, but also, once again, Rodgers, as much as you may not like it, or maybe you just don't like the guy, I don't know. To me, I don't care. He comes with a lot of baggage. Whether it's outside the field, outside the locker room, he's very opinionated. He's been very vocal on multiple podcasts and things like that. That can bring something to a locker room, even though you don't want it to. Unless your locker room is like a steel curtain, mind the pun, it's going to get through. It's going to distract somebody. It's going to bring more questions that are not going to be related to football. And it's going to be something that a team needs to consider. Players need to consider. Veteran leaders need to consider what they're bringing into the locker room. And then finally, Rodgers has never, and I think it's been overblown the last couple seasons, but he's never been shy of being critical of himself or the players around him during the post-game interviews, which is something that can work, but at times it can rub people the wrong way. We saw what happened with Mike Williams. People felt like he basically threw Mike under the bus. I feel like he did a little bit for sure. I think he didn't single other players out that failed during that game. It wasn't just Mike who didn't run the right route that he wanted him. That game, I watched that game. We streamed that game, I'm pretty sure. It was more than just Mike, especially at the end there. Rodgers, his accuracy was way off in that fourth quarter. There's other guys that made drops that just couldn't get into the same connection with Rodgers at the same time. And I think that was one of the few times Rodgers definitely let something go that he probably should have kept within the locker room. And that is also something to be considered, because guess what? After Mike was basically, thrown under the bus during that post interview, he was traded where? He was traded to Pittsburgh. Guarantee you, man. Mike, even though he didn't say anything publicly, he was probably like, thank God, man. Thank God I am out of that circus over there in New York. Even if he didn't single out Rodgers as an issue, which I don't think he has shown any disrespect or like anything or any real like vitriol towards Rodgers. I think Mike is a professional. Mike Williams is a professional, and I think he's like, hey, if they didn't want me, fine. But you can tell there's a possibility that some of that negativity might have kind of gotten into that locker room, or at least an opinion of what happened over there with New York when Mike was traded to Pittsburgh. So. But yeah, so a little bit of drama there. We'll see. I think they said Rodgers was doing a visit with Pittsburgh earlier today. So we'll see what that entails. Whether he's going to be signed, whether he's going to wait a little bit longer and maybe even go to New York. This time the Giants, to see if they want to sign him and see if they can hash something out. But yeah, man, it's going to be interesting. I think Rodgers does give the Pittsburgh Steelers their best opportunity right now to win. I don't think they're not in a great position to draft a potential franchise quarterback. Granted, with a first round pick, you can still find guys late in the first round. Look at Jalen Hurts, look at Jordan Love, Brock Purdy. My goodness, last pick in the draft. So you can find guys for sure. And I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are actually I wouldn't be surprised if they draft somebody just to have some development, whether that's behind Rodgers and Mason Rudolph, or if that's just behind Mason Rudolph. Um, I don't think they're going to be content with just, you know, having Mason there for the next year or two and not have anybody to develop. I think they want to develop their guy, and I think it's time. It's been a long time. Roethlisberger was their last quote unquote franchise quarterback, and even then, his final season or two was not amazing. So it's been a long time since we've seen. I know they had Kenny Pickett, but I think we could always kind of see Kenny as a guy that is good enough to be in the league, but he just never really showed the flashes of a true number one, a true guy like, Rodgers, Peyton Manning, or even guys like Love or something like that, or Herbert, who kind of flash the immense potential. I think Pickett was always a safe choice. I think they were hoping that he would develop more into a little bit more of like kind of like a Kurt Warner in a way where he's not super athletic, may not even have the strongest arm, but he's accurate. He can get you down the field. And with Kenny, it was never as consistent as you wanted it to be. I think it was the first, second, and third quarters at times where it was frustrating, where you could not get, you know, far away enough to feel comfortable into that fourth quarter where he typically excelled. But yeah, man, it's been a long time since Pittsburgh had a quarterback where you can legitimately be excited for, where a guy you can literally look at and say, this guy could develop into one of the top five, top three quarterbacks in the game. So, so yeah, I think with Rodgers, it wouldn't be the worst choice to pick him up. I know if you want to be competitive this year, I think he has enough to get you to the playoffs. But I think right now the biggest thing is the offensive line for Pittsburgh still needs to get better, and on top of that, their running game is it's just Jalen Warren. That's it. They lost Najee Harris, who was not amazing, but they're going to need a running game to be able to support Rodgers. We saw what happened when the Jets' running game did not develop. They had young talent, but it just never exploded. It never became something that the Jets could rely on, and I think that put more pressure on Rodgers, and we saw the effects of that. He was trying to do way too much, trying to kind of run and gun like he used to, and he's just not that guy anymore. He can show flashes, but he's not going to be the consistent Aaron Rodgers that we've grown accustomed to over the last, 18 years, basically, almost. So yeah, it'll be interesting. If I'm the Steelers, I'm not gonna lie to you, I would run with Mason Rudolph. I think the ups and downs or the results could be very comparable to the Rodgers. I think there would just be less drama, and I think that would also give you the opportunity to draft a successor without the how should I say it, like the storyline. The storyline that Rodgers and Love had, the storyline that Rodgers with Wilson had for a while, or at least for that first season. So yeah, I would run with Mason. I would let Rodgers sign with the Giants and see how that works out. All right. Bum, bum, bum. All right, final topic here. We're going to talk about some wrestling, man. So I'm going to give you some of my favorite wrestlers that I grew up watching, man. Not in any particular order except for the final one. But yeah, we're going to go with one of my top fives is Macho Man Randy Savage. Like if you grew up in the late 80s, early 90s, you grew up with Macho Man, man. Whether it was watching him at, WWF when it was WWF at the time, WCW, or even, let's be honest, man, snacking to a Slim Jim. Those commercials with Slim Jims They were phenomenal. They were always wild. And let's be honest, man, like Macho Man was a first off great performer. Like as a big of a guy that he was very athletic. He was a guy that wasn't afraid to get to the top rope. Like he was almost built like Hulk Hogan, a little bit lighter, but he was you could see a lot more athleticism. Like Hulk Hogan, great wrestler, one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest. But man, dude, he was you could see the lack of athleticism. He was a very much a power guy. Macho Man had the power, and he also had great feet, man. Just ability to fly, the ability to move around the ring in like quickly if he needed to. And on top of that, his crazy mic skills. The guy was not like your typical like like a John Cena, where John was great on the mic, and he could use his words, rapping, whatever it was. He was great at getting something out of the crowd. Macho Man lived in his own world, and at times it didn't make sense, but just the intensity that he said it was amazing. I think he was one of my favorite guys. I every once in a while I like to watch some of his interviews, especially with Mean Gene Oakland, and you could just tell Gene was just like, all right, man, I'm just gonna give him the mic, and I'm just gonna almost step away because this is gonna be a long one. And yeah, man, Macho was he never really had short promos. His were pretty lengthy, 3 to 4 minutes, and it was just like intense eye contact, especially if he didn't have the shades. But yeah, cocaine's a hell of a drug, guys, right? All right, so Macho Man. Next was Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid. First off, one of the greatest entrance music songs, I should say, of all time. Also a great entrance as well. Just a sexy boy. Boom. So just it hits, and once again, there's another guy that was crazy athletic. Obviously, significantly smaller than Hulk Hogan or Macho Man, but just a guy that even into his later years, just always showed athleticism. Always a showman. Always pushing the boundaries. Was one of the first guys, actually the first guy to do a ladder match. First guy to be part of the chamber match. Like so many things, so many firsts with Shawn Michaels. And I'm not gonna go through every single one of his great matches because there's countless. But Razor Ramon, a guy that at times would not have a great match with many people, but him and Michaels did just an amazing job during that ladder match. And then finally, the match with Undertaker, basically his final match, quote unquote. And dude, that was an amazing match. I remember watching that when I think it was like a month after it came out because I didn't get a chance to watch the pay-per-view. And dude, it was great, man. Great theater, great athleticism by two guys that are at the time were probably significantly closer to their retirement than they were, anything else. But man, dude, they put on a performance that was amazing. And Shawn obviously always great performances, especially if a guy could go toe to toe with him, move for move, speed wise. And also another match that I want to highlight is one of my favorites. I remember watching this one live. I remember eating I'm pretty sure I was eating tacos while I was watching this match, and that was with Shelton Benjamin on Monday Night Raw. Just the way that it ended, man. Shelton just going toe for toe, just outdoing Shawn Michaels when he could, and then finally that match ended with Shelton trying to springboard himself across the ring, which he was able to do, and just ran right into a Sweet Chin Music, man. It was a great ending, and yeah, that one stuck with me for a while, man, just because that match nonstop, man, just great action. So, yeah, Shawn Michaels, great wrestler, one of my favorites. Number 3 here, it would be Batista. I grew up watching wrestling, but then I took I don't want to say a break. It wasn't intentional. It was just more of like I didn't watch it. But when I finally came back to it just for a little bit, it always ebbs and flows. Usually I kind of skip like 3 or 4 years at a time, and then I kind of watch it for a while, and then but I started coming back when the Evolution saga. If you know what that is, Triple H, Randy Orton, Ric Flair, Batista kind of had a stable together, and I kind of caught the tail end of that when Batista, I think he had just won the Royal Rumble and was choosing between JBL, I think it was JBL, and Triple H. And yeah, seeing that, and I think Batista, like at the time, he wasn't as good of an actor as he was, but I think his physique and his intensity in the ring sold so much of it, man. He was a guy that could easily. It's always tough to get a guy that can overpower a guy like Triple H, especially at the time, because Triple H was not only quote unquote the game, he was like the quote unquote final boss, kind of what you're seeing with The Rock now. But yeah, he was the guy, and also Triple H is not a small guy, especially at that time. He was massive. He was a massive human being. So to find a guy that could be his equal in terms of physicality, but even surpass him and intimidate him, which is what you needed. You needed to be able to create a guy that was going to be able to overpower him at the end when he won. And that's what, Batista was able to do. I think it was in WrestleMania 21, which is a long time ago at this point. But yeah, man, I was a Batista fan, man. The Animal is Unleashed. Always great. That was always fun. And then the final two guys that I want to talk about, I actually have pictures of these guys just from the internet. Nothing crazy. And that is going to be Ricky Steamboat, man. One of my favorite wrestlers growing up. Just always had great matches, man. Like a pure wrestler. Just the way he was able to move around the ring. You could clearly tell that this guy was from a wrestling background. He wasn't a performer. Even though he was pretty good at performing, he just wasn't the flamboyant, he wasn't a Hulk Hogan where it was playing to the crowd. It was, that's where his, wheelhouse was, or Macho Man or anything like that. Ricky was a technician, as they like to call him, like a Daniel Bryan in a way. And yeah, man, his matches were at times, like if you were a fan of just the pure showmanship and things like that, you might have seen his matches be kind of, I don't want to say boring, but maybe a little bit, less eventful. But man, dude, when you got him with a guy that could wrestle, like a Bret Hart, like a Macho Man Randy Savage, when you got him and Ricky Steamboat, guys like that with Ricky, it was incredible, man. It was if you were, like I said, if you were a fan of just pure wrestling, of guys in their timing, everything seems smooth, everything seems almost too easy, Ricky was your guy. Ricky had great chemistry with a lot of people, man, and he was able to do some of the best moves, or like I forget what they're called, but like bumps in a way. Not bumps, but kind of like little segments where you can clearly tell that they had to practice this. This is like, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. You can always tell that there's like little spots. I think that's what it's actually called, but spots that you want wrestlers are trying to hit. And Ricky was a guy that it always seems so effortless, especially if you got him with a great partner. But yeah, Ricky Steamboat, man, just a great dude. Also, I was a fan of Bruce Lee growing up. He doesn't look exactly like Bruce Lee, clearly significantly bigger, especially as he got older. But yeah, man, I was always a fan of like that. To me, that was like, I was like, oh, dude, this guy is like a ninja, just the way he moves, so smooth, so effortless. But yeah, man. So Ricky Steamboat, I think a guy that gets overlooked a lot during that era. Like I said, I think I mentioned Hulk Hogan, Macho Man. He gets. I think Ricky gets overlooked. But if you're a big WWF fan, you remember Ricky Steamboat. All right, and finally, the final wrestler. This guy was my favorite of all time. I was when I was a kid, I was a big action figure kind of guy. It was always fun, And this guy literally looked like an action figure come to life, and that is the Ultimate Warrior. Um, Mike skills, not a whole lot. He was like Macho Man if it was more confusing and weirder. But man, dude, but it was fun. It was hilarious. It was borderline hilarious to get a Ultimate Warrior like monologue, because you did not know what this guy was gonna say. Like, this guy was like, I think his entrance was some guys are like, oh, from L.A., or if you're the Undertaker from blah blah blah, whatever. This guy was from parts unknown, and when you listen to him talk on a promo that he was cutting, yeah, you're like, well, this guy's not from this planet, or his brain is just somewhere else. Like, if somebody said that this guy was taking mushrooms before every promo, or doing some psychedelics, I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. That's what it probably that would explain a lot, actually. But yeah, no, I think he was just a weird dude. I think he was a guy that was just really into his character, and I love it. I loved it, man. And on top of that, like I said, action figure come to life. The guy looks just insane as like in terms of a physique. But on top of that, like I said, when I was growing up, man, I always enjoyed like the Macho Mans, guys like that. And this guy was like Batista. One of his finishing moves always there was always a little bit of a indicator that the finish was coming, and that was similar to Batista, was grabbing the ropes and just shaking it, and then almost like hulking out like Hulk Hogan, but a little bit more of a routine, less chaotic. And yeah, man, the Ultimate Warrior was one of my favorite guys. And when I was able to see, this was on VHS, when I was able to see him beat Hulk Hogan for the title, man. Well, I think Ultimate Warrior had the Intercontinental title, and Hulk Hogan had the World Championship, the WWE title, WWF. And when he was able to beat Hulk Hogan for that title and have both of those titles in his hand as he was celebrating, just an amazing moment, man. I remember watching that on VHS. Like I said, great. Didn't have a whole lot of stamina. The matches had to be pretty quick for this guy. He was like he wasn't as bad as Goldberg in terms of like his matches needing to be short, but they definitely needed to be 12 to 10 minutes and under, because this guy was just always just sweating, and you can tell he was slowed down after a while. Just a big human being, not a whole lot of cardio back in the 80s. But yeah, man, one of my favorite, just the look, crazy hair, the war paint, the tassels, the bright colors. It was awesome, man. Yeah, I wish you would see that more. You get a little bit of that with like John Cena, especially with the wristbands and things like that. But yeah, it's yeah, by far my favorite wrestler when I was growing up. And like now I do like CM Punk. I like that a little bit more of like a sardonic and kind of like a little bit of a jerk, that stuff, because it's always interesting. But yeah, when I was a kid, and these are just me as a kid, these were my favorite guys growing up, man. It was always fun. All right. So before we head out here, let me know if you're in the chat, man. Let me know. Please leave a like on this video. Let me know that you continue to like some of these live streams that we're doing. But let me know whether it's in the chat or even in the comments after this stream is over. Let me know what your favorite wrestler is, man. What was your favorite wrestler growing up? What was your favorite match growing up? But yeah, man. Thank you so much. I hope to see you guys relatively soon. We'll be doing another live stream obviously next week, and I'm going to try to get you another film session video out next week as well. So thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. All right, thank you so much, guys. Once again, my name is Dave, and I'm not a coach.